What's up, Call of Duty fans? Welcome back to Checkmate Gaming. I'm I Hold Shift, and we're dealing with the first day of the Seattle home series. A very interesting one. We get our first look at a number of new rosters, plus our first ever solely search and destroy mid-match substitution. We'll talk about that one pretty early on, but let's dig in and take a look at our groups once more as far as which four matchups we had to talk about for today. Starting things off in Group A, we'll deal with London and the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Now, keep in mind for Group A, this is a must-win pool for all four of these squads that they want to be a major consideration to potentially break into the top six going forward as we get closer and closer to playoffs, or potentially breaking past that top five, top four mark if they can find a way to upset somebody in the playoffs. So for London and LAG, a lot of things to keep in mind. The first time that we've seen Zero. And I'll be honest, I was cautiously, I wouldn't even say optimistic, just cautious about Zero and how he might perform today. Things look pretty good for Zero. Picking up an aggressive sub, I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to match up with the speed that Dylan likes to play at. He gave it his all, and he looked incredible. Gunrunner first, hard point up. It would start off very beautifully for London. A touch shaky at the start, but Zero would pop off through the entire map all the way through. 250 to 159, London looking solid, LAG looking a touch lost. We'd go to Piccadilly for our second map, and at this point I'm sitting here wondering, LAG, what are these map picks for you? Because historically, in all the maps that were picked, and you heard Chance talk about it, they were like 1 in 13 in total in the map pool that they had put together. But for Piccadilly Search, I was most cautious about this LAG pick, if it was, because London has been good here, and Wuskin would once again put up some incredible snipes. 4 in one of the rounds specifically, not quite able to get the ace. But that all said, LAG, this was the mode they needed to win. They would find a way to come through and still take a 6-3 win on Piccadilly. A 1-1 series so far. We'd go to domination, where Los Angeles has been atrocious. They would fight strong, but in the end, simple engagements, simple numbers in the kill department, looking way too strong for the Royal Ravens. That'd be a 159 to 135. So map number 4. LAG going over to Ramaza hardpoint, and Aqua looking around for help at the beginning as he started off hot in the first two hills, somewhere around like 9 and 2, something like that. Nobody else even close, and even through the entirety of the map, nobody from Los Angeles Guerrillas really all that close to the work that Aqua was doing. But that would be enough to get the job done just off the OBJ time alone, 250, 236. So map 5 we'd go. I said this was going to go 5 one way or the other. It just came down to what the search and destroy would potentially be, in which order. It'd be St. Petro, and LAG would go down hard way too early, 5-1 or something like that nature. They did get a couple of rounds back, but London would clutch up to save from what I think would have been an embarrassing loss. 6-3 the score, 3-2 the maps. London moved to the winner's side. Los Angeles moved down to the elimination side. Seattle, New York, second match that we're talking about. It was actually the final match of the evening. And, well, a couple of interesting things here. Again, Enable back in the mix, but only for hardpoint. Pandur was going to be framed up to play through the search and destroy, which is very curious to me. Again, this is a pool in a weekend where you have to get through you have to get to the playoffs. You have to win at least 2 matches. You absolutely have to. So why play with this system now? Seems strange, and it would be strange, as New York was all over Seattle in the Gunrunner hardpoint. Enable had a terrible performance, 13 and 28, 27, something like that. Awful, just atrocious. 250, 175. New York start off hot. Arklov Peak, search and destroy. Pandur back in, first ever search and destroy specialist for the sub spot. But things would start off a 4-0 for the New York Subliners. It would get close near the end, but it would be too much of a deficit. 6-4 New York roll. Would we see a 3-0 here? Again, New York, I would say, is the strongest team in this pool. But for Seattle, you got to find a way to play some close maps for these guys. They would do that here in the domination on Gunrunner. A close game all the way through, really throughout, but Octane would go 21 and 13, and that was just a little bit too much for New York to fully get over. Seattle with a late lead, about 45 seconds with the time at the end, where New York had to make a special play, and they weren't able to do it. 154, 151 the score for Seattle to come back and get a map. St. Petro, hardpoint. New York was pacing the map out exactly how they wanted to. Enable, again, not having the greatest performance ever, and I think now, after the 250 to 200 came through, and New York taking a 3-1, Seattle Do you need to have a little bit of a kumbaya here and say, hey, we got to play what's strongest for us? That's Pandur. I think that has to be the case. I don't know. I didn't like what I saw really from this lineup with Enable in the mix. I think Pandur plays the role just as well, if not better. So why mess with the comms? Why mess with the chemistry? I'm a little bit puzzled by it. But I think from here on out, you've got a matchup versus LAG. You absolutely cannot lose that matchup. Not only because for Seattle, you're 4-0 versus the Los Angeles Guerrillas. You've only dropped 3 maps to them, but you can't go 0-2. For Los Angeles or Seattle, whoever loses this upcoming matchup in the losers bracket, their season might as well just be framed to be the number 12 or number 11 spot, because this is the best chance they have at finding, I won't say free points, but the best chance at finding a significant amount of points moving forward into that playoff. So I don't know. I think you just start Pandur, put Enable back on the bench for the rest of the weekend, because Pandur looked great last weekend. The mix that Seattle had with Pandur in the lineup looked much better than what it did this with Enable, not only before but also here today. So I'm a little bit concerned about what Seattle is 100% thinking. Let's take a look at Chicago versus Paris. This is actually where the action started in Group B. And now Paris has been, you know, I won't say slept on, but they put up a good performance in the most recent weekend, even though it didn't come out with the results that they were hoping for. Could they find a way to put some work in versus Chicago? The answer would be yes. They did relatively well in this entirety of the series. It was interesting because Azir Cave was our first map, and if you remember back to all of our previous videos, my big concern with Pristini, Envoy, and Scump was who's going to run the third AR. Are they going to run just 3 SMGs on maps like Azir Cave? Well, both teams would run 3 SMGs, 2 ARs. Dens would play extremely well. Luca as well for Paris as they controlled the early tempo, had a consistent lead throughout the entirety of the map, but Chicago would bounce back, have a late surge through P4, P5, and get the W 250 to 203. The St. Petro, we would go for the Surge and Destroy. For Paris, we've seen this map before a number of times where, again, all you have to do is just close things out. They lost around 11 versus Atlanta. They lost around 10 versus Chicago. Could they play this map more consistently? The answer, no, it would not be. 6-2, Paris had close games before, but they need to find a way to close out Search and Destroy maps. Scump and Pristini had some great moments throughout this entire one. A great map for the Chicago SMG line. Gunrunner for the domination. Chicago had a solid start, but Paris rebound very nicely in the second quarter of the first half, and then have an immaculate second half. They were down early, but they made their corrections. They ended the first half at a mild deficit, and they were able to steamroll through the second half, 171 to 136. Paris would find their way to take a map away from Chicago, and now we go to Hackney Yard for the hard point. Pristini would still be running around wild, and he would start in double negative. That was kind of the case. I didn't mention it in Azir Cave, but that was what he did then. That's what he did in the second time. Didn't work out for them all that well, but fortunately, Chicago started on the P2 side of Tire Shop, and they won the P5 rotation in the first rotation. It built a huge lead for Chicago, which Paris, they were able to claw back into it, send it to a third rotation where they actually won over the warehouse, and if they could just kill a little bit more time on the warehouse hardpoint, they had the rotation for P2 to close the game out, but Chicago would full flood into the warehouse, win their gunfights, find a 5-man wipe, and take the map 250 to 236. Chicago take the series 3-1, but do not sleep on this Paris team. They looked pretty solid. Finishing things out, OGLA going up against Minnesota. This needed to be a bounce-back match for Minnesota. This was a proving point, though, for OGLA. We'd start in Ramaza, where Minnesota has been playing extremely well with a ton of reps. It gets through, and this time they find a win, as OGLA couldn't match up with Minnesota really all the way through this one, 250-195. A couple of tight moments, but Minnesota just defaulted to giving up the fourth hardpoint in construction, winning the game off P5. Easy peasy, no problems. St. Petro, Search and Destroy. This has been a bad news Bears kind of omen for Minnesota as they had that round 11 loss for the New York Subliners. That would actually be the exact same thing here again for OGLA. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Minnesota needed to be better at Search and Destroy if they wanted to be a more convincing competitor this weekend. And OGLA, well, they looked just as good in Search as they had in weekends previously. That would be the case as they would secure the round 11 6-5. 1-1 the maps, Gunrunner for the domination. Great start for OGLA in the first half. They're up 40-plus points. But Minnesota just had a much cleaner second half, absolutely punishing OGLA all the way through. 167-157 Minnesota survive, and they go up 2 maps to 1. Azir Cave would be up next. Not one of Minnesota's most rehearsed maps in the last couple of weeks, but one of their better ones in total. And OGLA, okay, we see you. They played extremely well. Again, all 5 members showcasing where they found success on this map the weekend previously versus not only Atlanta, but also London. That would be the case here once again, 250 to 135 the score. Map 5, how about around 11 for you? Arklov Peak, back and forth we'd go. Minnesota, though, would just be able to hold onto the B site more often, as Optic Gaming just put too much investment there, could not win the offenses they needed to. That would be just enough of an edge to give Minnesota the round 11 win. So going into tomorrow, we've got ourselves some good ones coming forward, as you'll be dealing with London playing up against New York, and we've got LAG playing up against Seattle in Group A. That one, I think, is going to be pretty convincing. I wasn't 100% sure on this group at the beginning of the weekend. I'm more confident on it now. I've got New York taking this one versus London 3-1. I will give London some benefit of the doubt, as they did look relatively good throughout both hard points, and they had some moments in both searches, plus a consistent performance on the domination, but that was against a bad LAG squad. New York was incredible in both of their hard points, was very good in the search, which is one of those points that if New York can be good at the search and destroy while bolstering their respawn scores, this team could potentially be a top 4 squad. I've got at least London taking whatever their first pick is between the hard point or the search, but I've got the Dom going to New York subliners and the series going that way as well. For LAG and Seattle, I think Seattle, your best bet is to put Pandur back in, just start him throughout everything. Don't just put him in for search and destroy. Play him for everything. You roll through LAG. I think if you do that, you've done it before. Why not just do it again? The last time these two teams played, it was a 3-0 in favor of Seattle, and really the only map that was close was the Ramaza hardpoint, which Seattle still took on a 2-point deficit. I've got this one going 3-1 for Seattle to get through and potentially play up against London, where that's going to be an interesting match because Seattle, again, not being all that strong in the search and destroy. London not bad there. I personally think London gets through Seattle unless Pandur plays all the way through and has a hot day. If Pandur has a hot day and he plays in all the respawns, I think Seattle could get to the playoff. But at the moment, based on what we've seen, I've got London getting through this one with New York. Going over to Group B, with the matchups there, again, it will be Paris playing up against Optic LA in the losers bracket and a Minnesota-Chicago matchup in the winners bracket. Let's start things off talking about the winners bracket matchup between Minnesota and Chicago. This is going to be an interesting one because these two teams have played twice before, but you have to go back pretty far to get the last time they matched up. It was actually at the Dallas Online Home Series, and all 3 maps were extremely close in a 3-0 loss for Minnesota. My biggest problem with this Minnesota team right now is their search and destroy. Chicago looked pretty convincing there, looked like they were a little bit weaker in the respawns. Personally, I actually have Minnesota taking this one at a 3-2 map total. Again, plug some of the holes here for the Rocker, and you're in good spaces to finalize your spot from the winners bracket into the playoff. But I don't think Chicago has too much to worry about, as on the losers side of the bracket, you'll be dealing with OGLA and Paris. I think that matchup is actually going to be a really, really close one. The last time these two teams played, OGLA played them last weekend in Florida, and it was a 3-0 for the Optic Gaming boys, as they found a 252-31, a 6-5, and then a 174-133 from Hardpoint, Search, and Dom. For Paris, there were some great moments versus Chicago. I would not rule them out completely. I've got this one going the distance, but I still think Optic Gaming is the better team. They looked very consistent throughout the day-to-day against Minnesota, a very convincing Azir Cave, and yes, they were still in the Ramaza, plus 2 round 11s in Search are encouraging, considering that once again, you only lost the Dom at a 10-point deficit. For Paris, they did not look all that great in the Search and Destroy. And so I see this one going 5, and I see Optic taking both searches at worst, if not potentially 4, with them taking the search, the Dom, and obviously a hard point at that rate. But beyond that, I think Chicago should have no problem with either of these two teams. If Pristini can just hold up a little bit, just slow down, wait for his teammates, I think they'll just be fine there. But I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. Again, it's a long day, 6 games to go through. We'll be back with the day 2 recap afterwards, so make sure you subscribe on your way out. Leave a like if you liked the video, and of course, drop a comment to see what you guys have to say about how the games went today. Till the next one, hope you guys keep pulling it down. So long.